The Zorgonian ship, a sleek silver dart just moments before, was now a mangled mess of twisted metal and sparking wires. It slammed into the icy mountainside with a groan that echoed across the frozen landscape. Inside, alarms blared, red lights flashed, and the few surviving Zorgonians were tossed around like space peas in a cosmic blender. Outside, a blizzard raged. Snow, driven by howling winds, swirled around the wreckage, quickly burying the ship under a thick white blanket. This planet, designated LV-426b by the humans but known as Shivertooth in ancient Zorgonian legends, lived up to its terrifying reputation. It was a death world. The emergency hatch hissed open, releasing a cloud of vapor into the frigid air. One by one, the Zorgonians stumbled out, blinking their large, iridescent eyes. They were small creatures, barely reaching the height of a human child, with smooth, gray skin and 3 spindly arms. They were warriors, yes, but warriors used to the dry heat of their home planet, Zorgan. A collective gasp escaped their 3-nostriled faces. The cold, it was like nothing they had ever experienced. Their bodies, adapted to sweltering temperatures, were instantly assaulted by the biting wind. Their antennae, usually twitching with curiosity, drooped with shock. One young Zorgonian, barely old enough to be a space pilot, shivered uncontrollably. What is this?" he stammered, his voice a high-pitched squeak. An older, battle-scarred Zorgonian, his face etched with worry, replied, "This is snow." The human spoke of it. Frozen water, a weapon of this planet. Panic began to set in. They were stranded, freezing, and on a planet teeming with hostile humans. Their mission, to scout out a potential invasion route, had gone horribly wrong. The crash had damaged their communication systems, and their heat generators were sputtering, unable to combat the intense cold. It seemed like the Deathworld was living up to its name, and the Zorgonians' war against humanity might end before it even truly began. Zorp, the Zorgonian leader, tried to rally his troops. His voice, amplified by a small translator device attached to his throat, cut through the howling wind. "Soldiers, we are Zorgonians. We do not surrender to a little frozen water." But even Zorp's bravado couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. He knew the odds were stacked against them. Shivertooth wasn't just cold, it was actively hostile. The mountains were treacherous, the winds unforgiving, and the human patrols were relentless. He activated his wrist-mounted scanner, hoping for a sign of life, a flicker of hope. The scanner beeped weakly, then died. The cold had drained its power. Cursing under his breath, a series of clicks and whistles that translated to something akin to blast those ice-hearted Greeblies. Zorp knew they were on their own. "We must find shelter," he declared, pointing a trembling finger towards a dark opening in the mountainside. A cave. Anything to escape this snow. The Zorgonians, huddled together for warmth, shuffled towards the cave. Each step was a struggle against the wind and the slippery ice. Their 3-toed feet, designed for sandy deserts, slipped and slid on the frozen ground. As they moved, the snow clung to their bodies, melting slightly from their residual body heat and then refreezing, creating a thin layer of ice armor. This armor, however, was more of a hindrance than a help. It weighed them down and made their movements even more awkward. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed from the cave entrance. The Zorgonians froze, their antennae twitching wildly. Something was inside, something else that called this frozen wasteland home. Zorp gripped the energy pistol at his side, his heart pounding. Their fight for survival had just become even more complicated. The Deathworld had another trick up its icy sleeve. Zorp raised his energy pistol, its blue glow cutting through the swirling snow. He signaled for the other Zorgonians to spread out, their small forms trembling with a mixture of cold and fear. The shriek echoed again, closer this time, followed by a guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the very ice beneath their feet. "Prepare for anything," Zorp commanded, his voice strained. "Remember your training. Aim for the vital regions." Suddenly, a creature burst from the cave, a blur of white fur and sharp claws. It was a snow stalker, a ferocious predator native to Shivertooth, perfectly adapted to the harsh environment. Its eyes, glowing red in the dim light, locked onto the Zorgonians. The snow stalker lunged, its claws extended, aiming for the nearest Zorgonian. Gleep, the young pilot, screamed and stumbled backward, dropping his energy rifle in the snow. He was defenseless. Zorp reacted instantly. He fired his energy pistol, a beam of blue energy searing through the air. The beam struck the snow stalker in the shoulder, causing it to screech in pain and recoil. But the creature was far from defeated. The snow stalker, enraged, turned its attention to Zorp. It charged, its powerful legs propelling it across the snow-covered ground with surprising speed. Zorp fired again and again, but the snow stalker dodged the energy blast with ease. The other Zorgonians opened fire, their energy rifles spitting out streams of blue light. But the snow stalker was too fast, too agile. It weaved through the energy blasts, closing the distance between itself and Zorp. Just as the snow stalker was about to pounce, a beam of energy struck it from the side. The creature yelped and stumbled, giving Zorp a precious few seconds to react. He raised his pistol, aimed carefully, and fired one last shot. This time, the energy beam struck the snow stalker in the head. The creature collapsed, its body twitching in the snow. The threat was over for now. Catching their breath, the Zorgonians huddled around the fallen snow stalker, their antennae still twitching nervously. Gleep retrieved his dropped rifle, his three hands shaking. "Thank you, Commander Zorp," he squeaked, his voice barely audible above the wind. "You saved me." Zorp nodded grimly. "We must stick together," he said. "This planet is full of dangers, and the humans are still out there." He turned his attention to the cave entrance, now suspiciously quiet. "Let's move inside. Perhaps there is some shelter to be found." They cautiously entered the cave, their energy pistols held at the ready. The cave was dark and damp, the air thick with the smell of ice and something else, something wild and musky. They moved deeper into the cave, their eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. Once inside the cave, Zorp ordered two of his soldiers to attempt repairs on the portable heat generators. These devices, crucial for their survival, were designed to emit a warm field, protecting them from the deadly cold. But something was interfering with their function. The Zorgonians worked frantically, their nimble fingers manipulating wires and circuits. But the generators sputtered and coughed, emitting only a weak, flickering warmth. "It's no use, Commander," one of the technicians reported, his voice filled with despair. "The planet's magnetic field is disrupting the energy flow. The generators can't operate at full capacity." Zorp cursed again, the clicking and whistling sounds echoing through the cave. Their technology, their greatest advantage, was failing them. Panic began to spread through the ranks. They were trapped, freezing, and hunted on a hostile planet. Hope seemed to dwindle with each passing moment. Shivertooth was proving to be a formidable enemy. Huddling deeper into the cave, Zorp felt a shiver run down his spine, and not just from the cold. Despair was a dangerous enemy, more insidious than any snow stalker or human laser. He needed to find a way to inspire hope, to find a solution. He closed his eyes, trying to focus. Images flickered through his mind. The crash, the snow, the failing generators, and then a memory. A very old memory from his childhood on Zorgon. He remembered his grandmother, a wizened old Zorgonian with eyes that twinkled like distant stars, telling stories around a crackling fire. One story, in particular, stood out. It was a tale of a lost Zorgonian expedition that had stumbled upon a planet covered in frozen water. The explorers had perished, succumbing to the extreme cold. But the story wasn't just about death. It also spoke of the properties of this frozen water. How it could be shaped, how it could reflect light, how it could absorb heat. Zorp's eyes snapped open. He remembered his grandmother's words. Frozen water is dangerous, yes, but it is also a substance. A thing of power, if used wisely. Could it be? Could this snow, this frozen water that was trying to kill them, actually be their salvation? He looked around at his shivering troops, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. He knew he had to try. "Gleep," Zorp called out, his voice filled with newfound determination. "Come here." Gleep, startled, stumbled forward. "Commander." "The snow," Zorp said, pointing towards the cave entrance. "Tell me, what do you know about it? Have you touched it?" Gleep hesitated. I touched it briefly, Commander. It was cold, very cold, but it didn't burn me. It didn't dissolve me. It was just cold." Zorp's antennae twitched with anticipation. "Just cold," he repeated, his mind racing. "Describe it, Gleep. What did it feel like?" Gleep hesitated, shivering again despite being inside the cave. "It was sharp, Commander, like tiny needles pricking my skin. But it didn't burn. It didn't corrupt. It was just intensely cold." Zorp paced back and forth, his three arms gesturing wildly. "Tiny needles, crystals. That's it. It's made of crystals." He stopped and looked directly at Gleep. "Gleep, I need you to do something for me. Something dangerous." Gleep gulped, his large eyes widening. "Anything, Commander. I need you to go back outside," Zorp said, pointing towards the blizzard. "I need you to examine the snow more closely. I need you to bring me a sample. A large sample. But be careful. The snow stalker might not be the only creature lurking out there." Gleep hesitated for only a moment. He was scared, yes, but he was a Zorgonian soldier. He had a duty to his commander and his people. He took a deep breath and nodded. "I will do it, Commander." He turned and walked towards the cave entrance, his small form silhouetted against the swirling snow. He stepped outside, the biting wind instantly assaulting him. He reached down and scooped up a handful of snow, his 3 fingers quickly turning numb. He examined the snow closely, just as Zorp had instructed. He saw that it was indeed made of tiny, glittering crystals, each one reflecting the faint light from the cave. He felt the intense cold, the sharp pricking sensation on his skin. But he also felt something else, a strange, almost soothing coolness. He gathered a larger amount of snow, filling a small pouch attached to his belt. Then, shivering uncontrollably, he turned and hurried back into the cave, eager to escape the deadly cold. He had done his duty. Now, it was up to Zorp to figure out what to do with it. Gleep, shivering but triumphant, presented the pouch of snow to Zorp. "Here, Commander," he said, his voice trembling. "As you requested." Zorp took the pouch and carefully examined the snow. He held it up to the faint light, studying the tiny crystals. Gleep was right. They were sharp, glittering, and plentiful. He could feel the intense cold radiating from the pouch, even through his thick gloves. "Good work, Gleep," Zorp said, a spark of excitement in his voice. "You have done well." He turned to the other Zorgonians. "Soldiers," he announced, "I believe we have found a way to survive this death world. A way to turn its greatest weapon against our enemies." He explained his grandmother's story, the tale of the lost expedition and the properties of frozen water. He spoke of its ability to absorb heat, to remain cold even in warmer temperatures. "Our armor," Zorp continued, "is vulnerable to the humans' laser weapons. The lasers generate intense heat, which overloads our armor and leaves us defenseless. But what if we could find a way to keep our armor cool? What if we could use this snow to absorb that heat?" A murmur of excitement rippled through the ranks. The Zorgonians began to understand. The snow, the very thing that was threatening to kill them, could actually be their shield against the human lasers. "We must gather as much snow as possible," Zorp declared. "We will pack it into pouches, create a cooling system for our armor. It will be a risky endeavor, but is our only chance." The Zorgonians, energized by this new hope, sprang into action. They began collecting snow, filling every available pouch and container. The cave buzzed with activity as they prepared for their next encounter with the humans, armed with a weapon they never expected, the snow of Shivertooth. As the Zorgonians diligently packed snow into pouches, a scene flashed in Zorp's mind. A brutal defeat on a desert planet not unlike their home. Flashback. The sun beat down mercilessly on the Zorgonian troops, their armor shimmering in the heat. They were engaged in a fierce battle with human soldiers, their energy rifles spitting streams of blue light. But the humans were relentless, their laser weapons cutting through the Zorgonian ranks. A young Zorgonian soldier, barely more than a child, screamed as a laser beam struck his armor. The armor glowed red-hot, and smoke billowed from the seams. The soldier collapsed, his body convulsing. "Armor overload!" A nearby officer shouted, his voice filled with panic. "Fall back! Fall back!" The Zorgonians retreated, their armor failing one by one. The human lasers were too powerful, too efficient. The heat generated by the lasers was overwhelming their armor's cooling systems, causing them to overheat and malfunction. Zorp, who was then a young lieutenant, witnessed the carnage firsthand. He saw his comrades fall, their armor glowing like miniature suns before they succumbed to the heat. He knew then that the humans' laser weapons were their greatest weakness. He remembered the frantic attempts to cool down the armor, the desperate pleas for water, the futile efforts to find shade. But it was all in vain. The desert heat was too intense, the human lasers too powerful. The Zorgonians were defeated, their hopes of victory crushed. In flashback, the memory faded, leaving Zorp with a renewed sense of determination. He would not let that happen again. He would not let his troops suffer the same fate. The snow of Shivertooth was their answer, their shield against the human lasers. He will make sure of it. The Zorgonians worked tirelessly, their 3 hands moving with surprising speed. They packed the snow tightly into the pouches, ensuring that every space was filled. They experimented with different pouch sizes and shapes, trying to find the most efficient way to distribute the cooling effect. Some of the Zorgonians were skeptical. They had been taught that frozen water was a dangerous substance, a killer. But Zorp's unwavering determination and the memory of their past defeat spurred them on. They trusted their commander, and they were willing to try anything to survive. As the pouches filled with snow, the Zorgonians began attaching them to their armor. They placed them strategically, focusing on the areas most vulnerable to laser fire: the chest, the back, and the shoulders. The pouches felt cold against their skin, but it was a welcome cold, a promise of protection. Gleep, despite his earlier fear, worked with particular enthusiasm. He felt a sense of responsibility, a sense of pride in his contribution. He had discovered the key to their survival, and he was determined to make it work. Zorp watched his troops with a mixture of pride and anxiety. He knew that their makeshift cooling system was a gamble. It might work, it might not, but they had no other choice. They had to be prepared for anything. As the last pouch was attached, Zorp addressed his troops. "Soldiers," he said, his voice filled with conviction, "we are ready. We have turned the Deathworld's greatest weapon into our greatest defense. We will face the humans with courage and determination. We will not be defeated." The Zorgonians cheered, their voices echoing through the cave. They were still cold, still scared, but they were also hopeful. They had a plan, a purpose, and a chance to survive. They were ready to face the humans, armed with the snow of Shivertooth. As the Zorgonians emerged from the cave, clad in their snow-cooled armor, a new threat materialized. A human scouting party, clad in white camouflage gear, appeared on the ridge above them. The humans moved with confidence, their laser rifles held at the ready. They clearly expected an easy victory. The human leader, a burly man with a grizzled beard, raised his hand. "Zorgonians!" he shouted, his voice amplified by a small device attached to his helmet. "Surrender now, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Zorp stepped forward, his 3 arms held high. "We will not surrender," he replied, his voice echoing through the snow-covered landscape. "We will defend ourselves." The human leader chuckled. "So be it," he said. "Prepare to meet your doom." The human soldiers opened fire, their laser rifles spitting out beams of red light. The beams streaked through the air, heading straight for the Zorgonians. The Zorgonians braced themselves, their snow-cooled armor ready to absorb the heat. The first laser beams struck their armor, and a hiss of steam filled the air as the snow began to melt. But the armor held. It didn't overheat. It didn't malfunction. The Zorgonians returned fire, their energy rifles spitting out streams of blue light. The battle was joined. The humans, confident of an easy victory, were caught off guard by the Zorgonians' resilience. Their laser beams, which had easily penetrated Zorgonian armor in the past, were now being deflected by the snow-cooled shields. The tide of the battle was turning. The Deathworld, which had seemed so hostile, was now working in the Zorgonians' favor. The snow, their unexpected ally, was giving them a fighting chance. The battle raged on, the air filled with the crackling sound of energy weapons and the hiss of melting snow. The Zorgonians, fueled by adrenaline and a newfound sense of hope, fought with a ferocity they hadn't possessed before. The snow pouches were working. Each time a laser beam struck their armor, the snow absorbed the heat, turning into a cloud of steam. The armor remained cool, preventing the dreaded overload. The Zorgonians could withstand the human lasers for longer than ever before, giving them a significant advantage. Gleep, his initial fear replaced by excitement, darted between the Zorgonian soldiers, replenishing their snow pouches as needed. He scooped up fresh snow from the ground, quickly refilling the pouches and ensuring that the cooling system remained effective. Zorp, his energy pistol blazing, took down one human soldier after another. He moved with a speed and agility that surprised even himself. The snow-cooled armor not only protected him from the heat, but also seemed to enhance his physical abilities. The human soldiers, realizing that their initial assessment was wrong, began to panic. Their laser beams, which had once been so deadly, were now being rendered ineffective by the Zorgonians' clever use of the environment. They had underestimated their enemy, and they were paying the price. "What's going on?" the human leader shouted, his voice filled with frustration. "Why aren't our lasers working? Their armor should be melting by now." One of his soldiers, his face pale with fear, replied, "They're using the snow, sir. They're packing it into pouches and attaching it to their armor. It's absorbing the heat." The human leader stared in disbelief. The snow, the very thing they had dismissed as a mere nuisance, was now turning the tide of the battle. He knew they had to change their tactics, and fast, or they would all be killed. The human soldiers, accustomed to their lasers easily melting through Zorgonian armor, were now witnessing something unbelievable. Their shots were impacting, yes, but the Zorgonians were still standing. Steam billowed from their armor, but they remained upright, returning fire with unwavering accuracy. The human leader, his face a mask of disbelief, barked orders into his communicator. "Report. What's the status?" "Sir, their armor." "It's not overheating," a soldier replied, his voice strained with panic. "We're hitting them, but it's like they're wearing shields. Shields made of ice." "Ice," the leader scoffed. "Impossible. Ice wouldn't stand a chance against our lasers." But the evidence was undeniable. The Zorgonians, once on the verge of defeat, were now pushing back, their blue energy blasts finding their mark with increasing frequency. The human soldiers were falling, their white camouflage providing little protection against the Zorgonian assault. The human leader, realizing the gravity of the situation, made a difficult decision. "All units, fall back," he ordered. "Regroup and reassess. This is no longer a scouting mission. This is a full-scale engagement." The remaining human soldiers, relieved to escape the Zorgonian onslaught, retreated towards the ridge, their confidence shattered. They had come expecting an easy victory, but they had found a determined enemy, armed with a surprising and effective defense. The Zorgonians watched as the humans retreated, their antennae twitching with satisfaction. They had survived the initial assault, and they had proven that the snow of Shivertooth was a force to be reckoned with. But they knew that this was just the beginning. The humans would be back, and they would be even more determined to destroy them. The Zorgonians had to be ready. As the human scouting party scrambled back up the ridge, Gleep, ever resourceful, noticed a discarded piece of wreckage from their crashed ship, a long, hollow metal tube. An idea sparked in his mind. He raced towards the tube, his 3 hands working furiously. He began to pack the tube with snow, tamping it down tightly with his small fists. He knew that simply throwing snow at the humans wouldn't do much good. But what if he could compress it, create a solid projectile, and launch it with force? With the help of a few other Zorgonians, Gleep rigged a makeshift launching mechanism using spare parts from their energy rifles. They attached a small energy cell to the tube, creating a primitive but potentially powerful ice cannon. As the last of the human soldiers reached the crest of the ridge, Gleep aimed his creation. He took a deep breath and activated the energy cell. The tube hummed with power, and a blast of frigid air shot out, propelling the compressed snow with incredible force. The projectile, a solid block of ice, slammed into the ground just ahead of the retreating humans. The impact sent a shower of ice shards and snow flying through the air, creating a temporary blizzard. The humans, caught in the sudden blast of ice, stumbled and fell. They lost their footing on the slippery slope. Their retreat effectively halted. The ice cannon had worked. "Fire again," Zorp commanded, his voice filled with excitement. "Keep them pinned down." Gleep and his team worked quickly, reloading the ice cannon and firing another projectile. The humans, now completely disoriented and demoralized, were trapped between the Zorgonians' energy weapons and the ice cannon's icy barrage. Their retreat had turned into a rout. With the human retreat turned into a chaotic scramble, Zorp seized the opportunity. "Advance," he commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "Push them back. Show them the power of Shivertooth." The Zorgonians, their confidence soaring, surged forward. They used the terrain to their advantage, taking cover behind rocks and snowdrifts. Their snow-cooled armor protected them from the human lasers, and Gleep's ice cannon kept the humans pinned down. The human soldiers, demoralized and disoriented, offered little resistance. They were caught between the Zorgonians' relentless advance and the treacherous, icy terrain. They stumbled and fell, their white camouflage no longer providing any concealment. The Zorgonians' energy weapons found their mark with ease, taking down one human soldier after another. The snow, once a source of fear and despair, was now their greatest ally. They were using the environment to their advantage, turning the Deathworld into a weapon. As they pushed the humans further up the ridge, Zorp realized that they were on the verge of a complete victory. The human scouting party was on the verge of annihilation, but he also knew that this was just a small battle in a much larger war. The humans would be back, and they would be even more dangerous. "Hold your fire," Zorp commanded, halting the Zorgonian advance. "Let them escape. We have proven our point. We have shown them that we will not be defeated easily." The Zorgonians, their antennae twitching with anticipation, obeyed their commander's orders. They watched as the last of the human soldiers disappeared over the crest of the ridge, their retreat a testament to the Zorgonians' newfound resilience and resourcefulness. The Deathworld had been conquered for now. Back at the human base camp, nestled deep within the icy mountains, the human commander, General Petrov, listened to the report with a grim expression. The surviving members of the scouting party, battered and bruised, recounted their harrowing experience. "They were different, sir," one of the soldiers stammered, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Their armor, it didn't melt. It didn't even get hot. It was like hitting a wall of ice." "Ice?" General Petrov scoffed. "That's impossible. Our lasers are designed to penetrate any known armor." "I know, sir, but that's what it felt like," the soldier insisted. "And they had some kind of ice cannon. It fired solid blocks of ice. It was like a blizzard hitting us out of nowhere." General Petrov listened in silence, his mind racing. He had underestimated the Zorgonians. He had assumed that their crash landing had left them vulnerable, easy prey. But he had been wrong. They had adapted, they had innovated, and they had turned the environment against him. He knew that he had to change his strategy. He couldn't simply rely on brute force. He needed to find a way to counter their snow-based defenses. He needed to understand how their armor was able to withstand the heat of his lasers. "All right," General Petrov said, his voice firm and resolute. "I want a full analysis of their tactics. I want to know everything about this ice armor. And I want a plan to break through their defenses and eliminate the Zorgonian threat." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his soldiers. "This is no longer a simple scouting mission. This is a war for survival, and we will not lose." He dismissed the soldiers and turned to his communication officer. "Contact headquarters," he ordered. "Tell them we need reinforcements. And tell them to send us everything they have on Zorgonian weaknesses. We're going to need it." Back in the relative safety of the cave, the Zorgonians erupted in cheers. They had won. They had faced the humans and emerged victorious. They had proven that they could survive on this hostile planet. Zorp, his face etched with pride, watched his troops celebrate. He knew that this was just a small victory in a much larger war. But it was a victory nonetheless, and it gave them a much-needed boost in morale. He raised his 3 arms, silencing the cheers. "Soldiers," he announced, his voice filled with emotion. "We have done well. We have shown the humans that we will not be defeated easily. We have proven that we are Zorgonians and we are survivors." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his troops. "But this is just the beginning," he continued. "The humans will be back, and they will be even more determined to destroy us. We must be prepared. We must continue to adapt. We must continue to use the resources of this planet to our advantage." He pointed towards the snow-covered landscape. "The snow," he said, "is our key to survival. It is our shield against the human lasers. It is our weapon against their arrogance. We must learn to master it. We must learn to use it in ways that we never thought possible." The Zorgonians nodded in agreement, their antennae twitching with newfound resolve. They had faced death, they had adapted, and they had emerged victorious. They had discovered the secret to survival on Shivertooth. The snow, once a symbol of fear and despair, was now a symbol of hope and resilience. They were ready for whatever the future held. They were ready to face the humans, armed with the power of the Deathworld snow. With a renewed sense of purpose, Zorp turned his attention to the damaged communication systems. He knew that their victory against the scouting party was just a temporary reprieve. The humans would be back, and they would be stronger and more determined than ever. He needed to inform Zorgan High Command of their situation, to request reinforcements, and to share their discovery about the snow. He knew that this information could be crucial in the ongoing war against humanity. He gathered the Zorgonian technicians and ordered them to focus all their efforts on repairing the communication array. They worked tirelessly, their nimble fingers manipulating wires and circuits. Hours passed, and the cave buzzed with activity. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the lead technician approached Zorp, his antennae twitching with excitement. "Commander," he announced, "we have established a weak signal. We can send a short message to Zorgan High Command." Zorp's heart leaped with joy. He had a chance to inform his superiors, to request assistance, and to share their discovery about the snow. He knew that this message could change the course of the war. He rushed to the communication console and prepared to send the message. He had only a few seconds, so he had to be concise. He took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone, his voice filled with conviction. "Zorgan High Command," he said, "this is Commander Zorp of the crashed vessel Stardust. We have landed on Shivertooth. We have encountered the humans, and we have discovered their weakness. The cold is our weapon. Repeat, the cold is our weapon." He sent the message, hoping that it would reach its destination. He knew that it was a long shot, but he had to try. The fate of his troops, and perhaps the fate of the Zorgonian race, depended on it. As the faint signal carrying Zorp's message faded into the vastness of space, the Zorgonians turned their attention to the task at hand, preparing for the inevitable human counterattack. They knew that the humans would not give up easily. They would be back, and they would be ready for a fight. The Zorgonians worked tirelessly, reinforcing their snow-cooled armor, stockpiling snow for Gleep's ice cannon, and scouting the surrounding terrain for strategic defensive positions. They were determined to be ready for whatever the humans threw at them. Gleep, his confidence soaring after his success with the ice cannon, began experimenting with new designs. He scavenged more wreckage for the crashed ship, searching for materials that could be used to improve the cannon's range and power. He envisioned a whole arsenal of snow-based weapons, capable of turning the tide of the war. Zorp, meanwhile, focused on training his troops. He drilled them in the use of their snow-cooled armor, teaching them how to move and fight in the icy terrain. He emphasized the importance of teamwork and resourcefulness. He knew that their survival depended on their ability to adapt and innovate. As the days turned into nights, the Zorgonians transformed the cave into a fortress. They reinforced the entrance, created hidden tunnels, and set up defensive perimeters. They were ready for the humans. They were ready for war. Despite the looming threat, a sense of hope permeated the Zorgonian ranks. They had faced death, they had adapted, and they had emerged victorious. They had discovered the secret to survival on Shivertooth. They had turned the Deathworld's greatest weapon into their greatest defense. They were Zorgonians and they were survivors. They were ready to face the humans, armed with their snow-cooling technology, their ingenuity, and their newfound hope. The battle for Shivertooth was about to begin, and the Zorgonians were ready to fight for their survival. The cold was their weapon, and they were ready to wield it with all their might.